Hello, can everybody hear me?
You're good.
I'm just a little nervous, so forgive
Bless
me.
her, Jesus.
I'm so glad to be here to talk about my life and hopefully help some people.
Yes.
I was born in Yugoslavia, the former Yugoslavia, it's now Serbia. I'm German, and we had a beautiful life. It was a small town. I had a beautiful family. Grew up in the country. Everything was so nice, so fresh. Mother had to grow everything and can everything to have it. There were no preservatives and there were no sicknesses or cancer or anything like that. And people were getting old. I had a great-great-grandmother who was 104.
Wow.
So I'm kind of hoping not to get that close, but as long as I can, I keep going. Anyway, our town was like 92% German people. They all came from Germany and settled down in Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia had been through a couple of, one time through Hungarian and then through the Serb and then back to the Hungarian again. But when I grew up, it was like German. And in 1941, the German came through Yugoslavia. They were pushing towards Russia. And when they came through, we were all happy, finally that is one time where we belong to the same people. But in the first week already, we noticed that these were all Nazis. I'm German, but I'm not a Nazi. They had taken 17 people and killed them without having any judgment or anything. They just killed them because they were different. And we realized then that is not going to be that easy. But we had a lot of people from our people who went in the German army, joined them, and volunteered. And we thought, yeah, things would be getting better, but it really was not that great. But then in 1944, the Russians pushed the Nazis back, and as they came through our town, the communist people joined the Russian. The communists joined the Russian. And then the Serb, the people who the Nazi mistreated, they wanted to get back at us German people for what the Nazi did to them. They started to take men at night out of their beds, took them out, they tortured them, some died, some were beaten and then they arrested them. And that kept going on until in March 1945. Then they came one day and said everybody had to get out of the house. So we had to get out, and we were warned before to take whatever we can to take with us. I had a little brother then who was only 6 months old at that time. So we just had to go out on the street, and they pushed us all in one section of the town, which we called the ghetto. There we were put, the whole town was put in that one little section. So we were there, but we always had hope to go home. So after 2 weeks, they sent us home again. So when we got home, we were happy. We started to plan for the gardening and everything again. But then again, the communists came the second time, and they came real fast, got us all out, and got us in a bigger area. And there we were all separated, the girls, the boys, the older people, and the younger with children, and the one who were able to work. But because of so many people in the same thing, we didn't get much food. Sicknesses started out because of the bathrooms. Everybody had to use the same bathroom and in some little houses there. And so typhoid broke out and sicknesses. Well, I had a little brother, which at that time was like 10 months old. He got sick, and he died. He didn't die of typhus, but he died. My sister got typhus fever, and she was put in a hospital. And because my brother died, my mother was free. She said, I'm going to go to the hospital and help out with those. It wasn't really a hospital. It was just a building where there was straw on the floor and people were laying there. And so my mother went there to help, but my sister died then. But while my mother was there working on it, she caught typhus fever too. My sister died, and they didn't know if they could tell my mother, but they did tell her, and she broke down then, and I don't think she did remember it. It's just about 2 days later, then they came and told us, everybody to get out of the houses. They drove us all in the middle street, and people were all walking towards the train station. So while we were gone, and I heard that they were going to ship us out of the town, I was desperate, and I said, I cannot leave my mother. I lost my brother, my sister, and a cousin, and I said, I don't. So I pushed my way through the people backwards, and I went into my mother. I said, Mother, they're shipping us out. I don't know where we're going to go. And I said, I don't want to leave you. I cannot leave you. And finally she opened her eyes, but when she looked at me, she said, who are you? So I just started to cry more. I said, I know she didn't recognize me. Her fever was so high and that, but then while I was there, communist soldier came bursting in and told me to get out because he must have noticed that I got in that house. So I went outside, and we went all to the railroad station, and I'm looking, and I said, okay, where's the train? I don't see a train. But I saw the dirt aisle. There was a cattle train standing there, and a lot of soldiers were there, communist soldiers. And we were standing there. There were about 750 people there. That's what they had reported it was. And then suddenly there was a push from behind. They were pushing all the people towards that cattle train. People were running, all the people were falling over the dirt. You know, we had to go over the iron ring where the train drives. I don't know what you call that. They were falling, and children were crying. Little children couldn't go, and they opened up the cattle train and started to push us all in there. The old people couldn't climb, and I managed to climb up there, and I scratched my arm and my knees, but it didn't matter. I went in a corner and I just sat down. People were coming in. We were about sometimes up to 50 people in one cattle train. There was only one little opening on the top. But while I was there, I went in the corner there. One woman came and she said, Anna, come here. She put her arm around me, and I knew she was praying. I knew God, but I was born and raised Catholic, so we never prayed loud. It always been a whisper. I knew she was praying, and she knew me. I didn't know her, but she comforted me, and I was there thinking, where am I going to go? I don't know where my father was and my two brothers. They were in the German army. My mother was there, sick. I didn't know where my grandparents were, if they were on the train, or where my brother was. My younger brother, he was only 2 years older than me. So we got in the train, and finally, when everybody was in there, they kind of closed the doors from the outside, and the train started to take off. So that woman was kind of comforting me. She had a sweet voice like my mother. So we were going, the train would stop, and more people were put in there, and it kept going. And finally, one time it stopped and said everybody had to get out, and we had to go to a different train, where you transferred wood and coals. You know, they are open, there was no covering on it. So we all had to go in there and sit down. I sat there on the cold floor. It was the end of September. I didn't have a coat and nothing. I only had whatever I had on my body, my dress. So I sat there and I always wanted to go to sleep. It was night and of course it's time to sleep. So finally the train stopped and everybody had to get off. And then they told us we had to walk. So we were walking for about maybe 5 to 6 hours. It was early in the morning when we arrived in a town. And that town looked like it was all empty. There was nobody in there. You couldn't even see any cats or dogs running around. It was just dirt. So they told us, because my town happened to be the biggest German people in there, and because we were the first ones there, they told us to select a street and just go in there and find a place. So we started walking in there. But while we were walking and people were talking and I was asking, where are we going? What kind of work do we have to do? Then the woman from the train heard me, and she came to me and she gave me her hand, and we were walking then together. But when we got there that was the big concentration camp where they put us. When we got there, I never saw that woman again. She just kind of like disappeared. So we settled down there, and it was like 3 days before we ever got anything to eat. People had to go to work the next town to bring the wood and some cornmeal and peas to start cooking for us, because we didn't really get any good food. It was just cornmeal cooked in water. There was no salt and nothing in it. And then for lunch we had dried peas. There were 15 peas in there maybe, and 15 black little bugs. I didn't know what they were. But I saw the kids, they took their finger in there, scooped them out, and then just drank there. So I did the same thing. But as time went on, you didn't even have time. You didn't even want to take those bugs out anymore. You just drank the whole thing because we were hungry. We just never had nothing else. That was the only thing. And then we had once in a while a piece of cornbread. Well, it wasn't cornbread. It was cornmeal made wet, put in the oven just to stick together. And then they cut a slice of it. That was the only extra piece we got. People started to get sick. Sicknesses broke out again there, because in that house where I was, there were 15 girls in there and one woman. She was kind of like taking care of us, watching over us. She knew there was a lot of things going on. People were being raped, and she knew that, and she was trying to prevent us from being out at night, always make sure we were inside. So that was going on, the same thing, day in and out there. We were losing weight. We had no combs. We had no toothbrushes, no towels. There was no place to take a bath or take a shower or wash. We wore the same thing day in and day out. We had one comb. We were infested with lice, with fleas. We had body lice. We broke out in rash all over our body, and I would scratch at night, and when I woke up in the morning, I had dried blood on my fingernails from all that scratching. But the only thing was, it was survival. We just kind of tried to stay alive and go and get the food, whatever we got. It got to the point that, we were losing so many people. The wagon would go down the street picking up the dead people. And it got to the point that when a person died and the wagon had passed, they would take that dead person in the barn in the back and have it laying there until the next day. Then at night the rats would come out, they chewed on the body. I'm sorry, it is awful language when I'm talking here, but that was truth. Then sometimes men would sit there and bang something, to try to disturb the rats, but there was no way you could control them. In the morning, they had to take the body out on the street. When we were going with our food to get our food, we were just stepping over them. It didn't even bother us anymore. It was just like a survival, a everyday thing, and we just got used to that, and so we just kept on going. But then it was like they took the wagon with the dead people, just dug a hole and threw them all in there. Nobody could go with anybody and that. But then it was like Christmas came, we knew it was Christmas, but all we were there sitting and talking what we had at home, and maybe someday we're going to go home again. I never did go to look for my grandparents because it was like all I was thinking of, where do I get food, I need something to eat and that, and so I never did go and look for them. But finally I thought I had to go and find them. So I did find them and visit them, but they were all weak. They couldn't go up and go for their food, so they were just really just starving themselves to death. But that was until January. I had kind of stopped going for my food. Once in a while, I got tired and didn't want to get up anymore. We had dysentery there, and typhus broke out, all sicknesses again there too. But then the beginning of February, I actually stayed in my place. I didn't get up anymore. I was tired. I was most of the time sleeping. So about the end of February, they said we all had to get up from the straw, our places there, and they're going to go around to spray for lice and fleas. So I managed to crawl to the end and got up and stood there and wait. And then the communist soldier came in with two women carrying the DDT powder. When that soldier passed by me, I said, I know that man. His name is Durin. And the woman who carried the DDT powder said, yeah, he's asking for a Friedrich family, but they told him they are all dead already. Then I knew who he was. When the Nazis were in our hometown that time, they were building an iron bridge over our river. He was a Yugoslav, a Serb, and he was working on the bridge. Since my brother and my father, they were in the German army, we had a room empty, and my mother rented that to that man. So he would come home at lunchtime, but my mother would always invite him and said, come and eat with us, and he became like almost a member of the family. I couldn't talk with him, but anyway, that was the man now as a communist soldier, and he was looking for me, for our family. So the woman was with us, understood the language. So she went there and tapped him on the shoulder because he was praying, and he turned around like, how dare you touch me? And she asked him, do you know this girl? There I stood, dirty. My hair wasn't combed. I had rash in my face. I had lice in there. I had body lice. My dress was dirty. I wore it for almost a year without ever taking it off or washing it. And there I stood and I looked up to him, and he looked down and he had tears in his eyes. He used to call me Hannah, and he said, oh, Hannah. And he talked to the woman. I couldn't understand what they were talking about. But then he left. That was late in the afternoon. In the morning he came. Girls were looking out the window and said, Anna, he's coming. He has something under his coat. So he came in the house. He sat there, right there. I managed to get up and sit there, and he opened his coat. He had a glass of milk, and I always used to say a piece of white bread because we hadn't seen any bread with that, and a bar of soap. So he sat there and watched me eating that, and that was just like something out of this world, having a glass of milk and a piece of bread. And he talked with the woman again, and he left. At lunchtime, he just came in and told the woman to wait like a half an hour and then send me over to the doctor's office, which was the next house, the next corner. So I went there, the pot under my coat, and went in there. When I went in there, there were other soldiers sitting there. They already finished eating. They had still their glass of wine there in front of them. Durin was pacing the floor. He must have been nervous. Rather, he was nervous because he was giving food to somebody, a prisoner there, or he was just nervous at all. But anyway, I gave him my pot there. He put baked beans in there and gave me another piece of bread. And all I could say was, danke, 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 thank you. And I left, and I never saw him again. So after that, it seems like my body had started to work again. I would get up and go for my food, whatever. But it was like the middle of March, maybe, when I was by there, I saw my reflection in that glass. I couldn't believe it. I stood there and I just looked and looked. My eyes were all fallen in the head. My cheekbones were sticking out. My dress got shorter, so I saw my knees. My knees were the biggest part of my legs. And I just stood there and couldn't believe that is me. I took my dress, folded it again, and I pulled it all the way on the other side. That's how big it had gotten on me. So it was one of my most depressing times. I just looked and I said, I look like a dead person between living people, and I'm going to die. I'm never going to get out of here again. Everybody dies. I lost my mother, my brother, my sister, and I don't know where my father is, my brothers, and I said, I'm here alone and I don't know what's going to happen. So I went in the backyard and I sat there. I found a couple of bricks and sat there and just cried. There I saw on the floor there was sunflower seed. There was just a little straw left from there where there used to be a straw pile. I picked up the sunflower seed and started to eat, and I would go out and every day and look for more seeds, pick up the seed and ate. I found out later in life how good sunflower seed is. So that was kind of like a revival for me. But I started to go for my food and ate whatever we got. One time in June, a woman came and said, Anna, you have to come to the gate, your mother is there. And I said, what? My mother? She is alive? Oh my God, there was no mail and nothing, we could never hear anything. I ran to the outside of the camp, there was, guards standing there, and there were 4 wagons there, and my mother stood there. I couldn't wait, they didn't want to let me go, but my mother talked to them, and so I was able to go and stay with her. And I just said, Mother, I'm never going to leave you. I'm glad that you're here and that. And then my friend, my school friend actually, her mother came with my mother. She was there. And then my mother told her, she said, Nani, look at me and listen to me what I said. When I tell you to go, you go and climb underneath the wagon, underneath the seat where the blanket is over. And I said, oh, okay, now next is going to be my turn. I'm going to be going with my mother. And then my mother turned to me and she said, Anna, I want you to go and get Oma, her mother. And I ran as fast as I could to get my grandmother. Well, she was so weak she could hardly walk, but she managed to go. And we got as close as 50 feet to the end. And the wagon started to take off, and there was my mother standing, waiting. My grandmother fell down on the floor and cried. Said, Cutty was my mother's name. Forgive me, because there was a lot of thing going on when she was young, and so she asked her for forgiveness. And she just cried. And I fell down there and I cried with her because my mother made sure that my girlfriend was able to go with her mother, but she didn't take me. So I was selfish and I cried too. But then my mother had to run to catch up with the wagon. So we went home, and pretty soon after that, both my grandmother died within a month. Then after about a month, somebody came again and said, Anna, your mother is here. So I went to the outside of the camp, but they said the soldiers already took her inside. So I found out where she was. They locked her up for a while, and I went there and threw the water. She was in a cellar, and I talked to her. I gave her hope. I said, don't worry, nothing's going to happen to you, you know. So 2 days later, they released her. And because of her then, I moved to a different room, and my mother took, my sister had a girl, and she was 5 years old then, 6 years old then. So my mother took her, and we moved to a different place. Well, my mother had to go to work, but I did feel safe enough knowing that mother was there at night. And one time they were going around, they were collecting all orphans. They wanted to take the orphan people, the kids, and take them to communist families to raise them as communist people. And my mother said, nobody is going to take that child away from me. She is mine. This is my daughter's daughter. She's not going to be going away. So she had an aunt in that room, and her aunt said, what if I tell them? And my mother said, what? She went over there to her. She was sitting in the corner on the straw there, and all I could see, my mother's hand going from one side to the other. She said, if you open your mouth, you wish you would be dead. And when my mother turned around, her hand was bloody and the blood was running around from her aunt's mouth. She said, nobody is going to take that child away from me. She belongs to me. And a couple of days later, they came to look for the people, and they came in our room and asked, are there any orphans? My mother said no. And I looked at that woman. She was sitting there and had her head down. It was cruel, I think, but it was survival. My mother had lost 2 children, and that was my sister's daughter, and she's not going to give it up. So she stayed with us, and because we both were Anna, she named her Anna Marie. Up to this day, she's still my little sister. So anyway, Mother had to go to work, and then we got shipped to a different concentration camp. They closed that concentration camp because we found out later high water came, and all the houses were crumbling then. I think that was God's doing. He wanted to destroy that whatever horrible thing was going on. We went to a different, smaller concentration camp, and there they were taking people out to work, like all farmers would come in, and they would pay for the people to work, but a lot of people would escape from there. And that was close to the Hungarian border. And one time a wagon came, they were looking for people to work at a brick factory. My mother spoke 3 languages, German, Hungarian, and Yugoslav. And she understood what they were talking, so she raised her hand and said, I know how to work on a brick factory. I used to work as a kid there. And so anyway, they selected her and my aunt and 2 other young women. So we ran home, grabbed whatever we had, and we went on the wagon, and we went. And when we drove out of that wagon, it was like, oh my God, I wanted to make the horses go faster, so afraid they're going to change their mind, and we had to stay. And once we got out of that concentration camp, I saw there were grass growing, trees were blooming. In concentration camp, there was nothing left. There was only mud. All the trees were cut down for woods to burn, and there was nothing growing. And when I saw all that out there, and the air was so fresh, I thought, oh my God, what a blessing. I would say many times, oh God, help me, oh my God, and that. But it was just a saying. It didn't come out of my heart. It was, people say, oh my God, whatever, and there's no meaning to it. But we went there to that brick factory, and from there we escaped. And we went through a lot of trouble to get out of there. A man tried to lead us to the Hungarian border, and he stopped and he said, "This is as far as I go." But he said, "If you go straight, you come right to Hungary, and there will be no guard." But while we were walking there alone, a dog started to bark. Anne was barking, and other people said, "Oh, you know, we are already in Hungarian." And the dog kept barking. My mother said, "I don't like that. I don't like that. I don't have a good feeling about it." She said, "I'm going in the cornfield, and I wait until in the morning, and then we'll find out where we are." So we went in the cornfield. It was in August. It was hot. We had to sit all the way down there. We had nothing to drink or eat, but it was okay. So after a while, then there were people working next door, so we couldn't get out of there. So they waited till the people were going home, and then my mother and another woman went to look to see where we were. We were still in Yugoslavia. If we would have walked, we would have walked right into the guard. The guard was standing right there where we were supposed to pass. So we made a plan to go through at night, picked out a place where we're going to go, and then we went. My mother was in charge. She was the strong one that my aunt always depended on her. And I had a cousin, he was 17, and he had Down syndrome. So he never listened to his mother, but he was listening to my mother. When she said, "Johan, you go back with your mother," he would go. So we were going to get to the end to cross the border. My mother picked up my niece, and I was right behind her, and we all started to run for the border. There was a fence, but the fence was already pushed down from other people who were crossing. So we crossed over, and then we just kept on running and running and running, and finally we stopped and said, "Okay, we're safe now, nobody saw us." So we started to walk through Hungarian. We started to go and ask people for food, and we got food, we got clothing, we got some money, and so we just kept on going. We were walking for about 3 weeks, from one town to the other town. Sometimes we got a place where we could sleep in a backyard in somebody's house. Most of the time it was on the street underneath a tree. So we were used to sleeping on the ground. So after 3 weeks, we finally reached the Austrian border. But as we made plans to cross over, we got caught from the Hungarian people. They took us in a train and took us to Budapest, the capital, to a prison house. It had bars on the outside. So we went in there, and luckily we only stayed 3 days there. But there, when we walked in that room, I said, "Oh, a bed. Finally I get to sleep on a bed." I lay down there and tried to sleep, and suddenly, ouch, something bit me. There were a lot of bed bugs. The people were walking around and had the light on, and I thought, why don't they sleep? Why do they have the light on, not going to bed? And then one man picked up that iron bed and dropped it in. It was black on the floor. And that's why the people were sleeping during the day, because they don't bother you during the day, only at night. So thank God we were only there 3 days, and then they released us. And we were going around again to beg for food. We came to one house, and the woman came out, and my mother would always stay distant and watch us. And the woman came out, and she had her eye on my niece. She touched her hair, she had blonde curly hair, and just kind of put her arm around the shoulder there and talking. My mother started to come closer, and she was talking Hungarian with her. And then the woman called her husband out. And the husband came out, and they looked at her. And then the woman wanted to take my niece and take her in the house. And my mother said, no, she grabbed her hand, and the woman didn't want to let go of my niece. So it was a tug of war, but my mother finally got a hold of her, and we started to run, and we never stopped for any food again. But then we had to find a place to sleep the night. So while we were walking, we found a lumber yard, and it had a fence around it, but we found an entrance. We went in there. There were two young boys who were released with us the same time. They walked with us, and so we went underneath the carport there and lay down to sleep. Well, we had my mother had the arm around my knees, and I had another arm around her. I woke up when I felt like somebody was pulling out my knees from my arm. So I kind of got startled, and I woke up and I looked at that, and I couldn't see my knees anymore. There were two men standing there. They were talking to my mother. My mother was crying, and I was like a lion. I screamed for Anna Marie. I couldn't hear her, I couldn't see her, nothing. And the man wanted to hold me. I tore away and I ran to the street, but I couldn't see her. But I saw in the distance a woman running with a child on the arm, and I ran in front of her, pulled Anna Marie from her, and she was sleeping all that time. She finally woke up and started to cry. I said, "Come on, they want to steal you." And we ran back, and when I got to my mother, she was crying there, sitting there. The men were gone. Well, those people were the one who wanted to take her the first time. They came after us and wanted desperately to have that little girl. Well, the boys said, "You go to sleep, we watch." So early in the morning, we got up and packed our things before the people would come to work, and we were heading and started to walk. We only walked one town. My mother was starting to get very sick. She had high fever and was very weak. So finally, we got to a house. They let us in, and we were able to sleep in the backyard there. And the woman was nice enough. She made some tea for my mother, and my aunt said, "No," she said, "you go and ask for food, and I stay with your mother." So we stayed there for about 4 days. We got enough money and we had food. So on Sunday we packed up together, and Monday we went to the railroad station and bought a ticket all the way to the Austrian border. We had enough money. So we went there, and when we were in the train, we were afraid. We had no paper or nothing. We had to get off the end of the railroad station to cross the Austrian border. But the conductor, I think that's what you call him, goes around for the tickets. He said, no, he said, "Just stay there." He said, "Don't worry about it. He's going to talk to the Austrian conductor who, when they change, you know." And so we stayed there, and sure enough, when the Austrian came in, they just looked at the cabin there, passed right by, nobody said nothing. So we were lucky to stay in the train, and we went all the way to the end of the train, which was Vienna, Austria. So I know we were free, but in my mind I was still a captive. I was still afraid somebody's going to come and take us back, and that it was just something you had to get used to. After 2.5 years, we finally got out. I was 13.5 years old, and I was 11.5 when we started to go in. So we stayed at the railroad station. There were a lot of people there, and anyway, my mother got a job, but she had to give up my niece to an orphanage there, so she was able to get work. I got a job at a, what they call, like, where they serve food, and there was a bar. And I was there washing dishes and clothes, and I got new clothes and everything, and I had a room of my own. I had a wash bowl, a dresser, and a bed to sleep in. And once a week we would go to a bathhouse. They would go and take a bath, and they sent me in the shower. Now that was funny. I was going in there were like 8 stalls, 4 on each side. And I walked in there and left my underwear on and went in there to wash. And I saw all those naked people coming in, taking showers, and I thought, oh my God. So it didn't take me long to learn to take off my underwear too so they don't keep their eyes on me. And I learned, to live in a different life, It was kind of exciting and it was new and strange, but school or church, there was nothing on my mind. So anyway, I met my first husband, and right away, there's my oldest daughter here, and her husband, and my oldest granddaughter. I had 5 children, 5 grandchildren, and 5 great-grandchildren. And I'm very proud of them. Anyway, I met my first husband, and we got married. And Helga was born, the oldest one. And then my brother, I have to back up a little bit. While I was working there, my mother found out where my father was in Germany. And she took the train and went to Germany, because we were in Austria. She went to Germany to find my father and wanted to bring him back. But he came back halfway, but then he turned around and went back and said he's going to come later. The only thing is, my aunt didn't tell my mother that he was living with another woman, because they thought after 2.5 years, they thought we were all dead, all the men. There was no contact with anybody, and they started new lives. So my father was living with that woman. So anyway, but it only was a short time later, my father did come. And they tried to make a life together, but my father was already ruined. He's chased prostitutes and spent all his money on them, and my mother tried desperately to keep the family together. My brother came also then that met with our family there, and they both were working on construction. My brother was saving the money, and my father would take the money for use for the prostitutes. My brother was upset, and he said, other people are working, trying to get their life together, and we are struggling, and we are not getting there. Anyway, he said, I'm going to run away, and he enlisted, and he came to America. So after a while then, while I was married and had my first child, he asked us to come to America. He said, if you want to work, there's a lot of work, you can work and make a living. So we registered to go through to the Catholic Caritas. We called it Caritas. I don't know what it means. But it was an organization who helped the people to go to America. America took in refugees then from Europe. And so anyway, we went, but I got pregnant then with my second child. So, but they said because we were not married in the church, we had to be married in the church. So we went to the Catholic Church and asked to be married. And he asked how much money you want to pay for the wedding. And I said, oh, nothing. We just want to be married before God. And he said, okay. So we went there on a Saturday. He led us all the way in the back to a room where there was a cross. And he married us there. 2 weeks later, I went to get the certificate. And I wanted to give a donation, so I gave him 250 shillings, which was not really that bad. Then he said, why didn't you tell me that you wanted to give money? I could have married you in front of the church. And I thought, okay, I didn't realize then, but anyway, we came then to America. And it was old when we came to America. My brother, but then my brother wanted to buy a house, a building, to remodel and then resell it. So we all got involved in it, but because my husband didn't make this much money, we kind of decided we're going to ask my mother-in-law to come to America to watch the kids, and I could go to work so I could make money. And we did. She came, no problem, she came, but after a while it was getting hard for me. She took over the whole household, over the kids. Whenever I would say something, I came home, I had complaints, well, the kids didn't do it, I had to do it. I didn't want to say nothing, and I was holding everything back, and it was getting harder and harder for me, and I started to cry and cry. So I told my husband, I said, why can't we get a room for her so I can have my family there at night? Oh, I cannot throw my mother out. She was a widow, and she was used to raising her children, so she just thought, well, she's taking over that. I became the 5th child in that. We already had then 4 children by that time. Well, I got so depressed that I just didn't know anymore what to do, and I told him, I said, well, you have to choose between me and your mother. Well, he said, I cannot throw her out, so I left. And I never forgot that. We split our children. The 2 older ones stayed with him, and I got the 2 little ones. I rented a room and I went to work. It was hard, but I had to work to make a living. But later he kind of thought we could get back together again, and we tried that once. It didn't work out. It was the same thing. He was drinking a lot, and it was gotten worse. So finally I just stayed there, moved out, and after a couple of years we got divorced. Then I met another man. I was working, but still going to church was not on my mind. I met this man. He was a refugee from Cuba. It was Spanish accent. His parents came from Spain. Actually, one time in my life I was very drunk, and that was the night I met him. It was Helga's fault. Helga called me and she said, Dad called, he said, he's going to come home, he's going to beat me up, and I didn't know how to calm her down. I said, I'm going to look for your dad and I'm going to talk to him. And I did go and look for him. I knew where he was, in which bar. But when I got in there, he had his girlfriend there, and I didn't know what to say. So I went to the bar, I ordered 1 shot of whiskey, and then another shot of whiskey. And then they got up and left, and I ran to the door and I said, oh no, I didn't talk to him yet. And they got in the car, and I looked at him, he opened the door for her, and I thought to myself, I was there, having a kid on the arm, one on the hand, and had to open the door for myself, and he's opening the door for her. So of course I was a little jealous. But anyway, they left, and I just cried. I got in my car, and I was speeding through the streets. And I remember girls would say many times, why don't you come to that bar there? They gather there all the time. There's music and dance. I didn't want to go home. I was so depressed. So I found that bar. I went in there, everybody looking at me, so I sat there at the bar. There was only 1 girl from work. So I ordered 4 more shots of whiskey. I was really stone drunk. I felt like one time I had to go to the bathroom, and when I'm looking at the door looked slanted, and I thought, how am I going to get through that door? It was just, that was the one time in my life really I was really gone. While I was sitting there trying to recover and kind of get myself back together, I couldn't drive home, I know I was drunk, when 3 guys walked in there, and the one guy was working at the same place I was, and I said, oh my God, he's going to tell everybody that I was drunk. So he came and started talking to me. He couldn't speak much English. He was a refugee from Cuba. His name was Jesus, but they called him Jesus. So anyway, we started talking, and he asked me for the phone number, and I said, no, I don't give phone number, but I gave him my number because I was drunk. I never did it because of the girls at home. So anyway, by 2 o'clock I felt like I was sober enough to drive home. So he asked me if I can drop him off at home, and I said, yeah, sure. So anyway, I took him home, and then he said he wanted to see me, tomorrow. So I gave him the number, and he called Sunday morning, and he said he wants to see me. I said, no, I don't go no matter. I have 2 girls. He said, well, bring them with you. So we went to see the movie, The Sound of Music. And then we went to parks and had picnics. It was always with the girls. And then we went to other movies and that. And after a year, he tried to talk me into, to get a divorce. So I finally did. I filed for divorce. It was 3 years already that we were separated. And then we got married. So I was married then to a Spanish person. But he was going to school. He wanted to learn more. He learned computers, and then he went on to learn to be a manager, and then he just worked his way up really good. Well, we were still living in Chicago at that time. He always wanted to move to Miami, to Florida, and I said, well, okay. So we did. Well, I got pregnant then, and at the same time I was pregnant, my daughter Helga got pregnant with my granddaughter April. So it was kind of exciting. We had 2 babies, and they looked like sister and brothers. And they really loved each other. They loved each other until the last day. But anyway, we moved into Florida. And my husband really advanced himself. I didn't have to go to work. Then Eric was 3.5 years old. Our son he was diagnosed with diabetes. So I stayed at home and was glad to be a mother. And what I wanted to do all the time, take care of my family. Well, when Eric's time came to go to school, we had a neighbor who told us to go and send him to the Baptist school. So I said, well, we are Catholics, Well, I went there and went in there, and I told them we are Catholic, and they said, no, we only teach about the Bible. Everybody is welcome. Okay, Eric got registered there for kindergarten. I told him that he was a diabetic and that. And then for a while, we started to go to church. And I had really enjoyed that. I would listen to the choir sing. Tears would run down. Something in my heart. It felt so good to hear that. And then we went for a couple of months, and then my husband didn't want to go anymore. And then I said, why don't we go back? Oh, I don't show my face now. I've been gone for so long, I'm not going back. But I used to go to school all the time, and going with the kids to a day camp or whatever, and always were there because of Eric. And I really got a woman to know very well. And one day I asked her, I said, Janet, how do you get that feeling, what you feel? How do you get that inside? She looked at me puzzled. She didn't know how to say it or what. But she said, when I married John, he was a Christian, and I became a Christian too. And she said that I wanted what other people have, and I didn't know how to get that. So anyway, I got lost. Well, anyway, my husband had lost his job, and we had to move, and he had to go a longer distance. And when Eric was in school, I started working for Weight Watchers. And anyway, we moved into a different city. And then there was no Haverhill school or church anymore, and Eric was going there. But anyway, my husband started to cheat on me, and it ended up in a divorce. And I said, that's the second time now. I'm never going to get married again. But I was there, and it was my first great-grandchild was born. April had her son, and I wanted to see him. So I came to Indiana, And in Cincinnati at the airport, I stood there and I looked for a book. I found a book that was called Embraced by Light. I picked that book up, and it was talking about a woman who had died and went to heaven, and then she was half Indian and half English. And they always told her, you're no good, God punish you, and that, and she thought God never gonna love her because she was too ugly and everything. And when I was reading that, and I said, if God loved her, and God looked down on me, looking at a dirty girl with lice and fleas, and he was looking at my heart, why can't he do that to me? And by the time I got back home, I finished that book and I was looking for a church. I called a friend and she said, Anna, just 2 miles from you, there is a big church. So I went there to check it out. I thought, okay, Wednesday night, I sneak in after 7 o'clock and just sit in the back there and watch. But when I got there, went in the church, and I heard the choir and everything, I just started to cry. And there was something in my heart. I just didn't know what it was. So I kept going to church all the time, Sunday and Wednesday, and then they had orientation. And first we had, Easter came. And Easter was my son's birthday. It was April 12, 98. It's going to be 20 years that I became a Christian. I wanted to go to church that day because the church was too big. They had about 8,000 people. They did it at the auditorium. So I climbed up there all the way up on the top of the balcony. I wanted to see everything. I didn't want to miss anything. They had a passion play. They came in, Jesus came in with the cross, woman crying, soldiers beating them, and they were all dressed up in their clothing and that. And I just started to cry and cry and cry. And then the pastor had an altar call. Anybody who wants to give their life to Jesus. I couldn't get down fast enough from that balcony. I went down there and I gave my life to Jesus. It didn't change much in me at first. Everything takes time. It goes slowly. I just noticed that I didn't like watching the movies I used to watch. I didn't like listening to the music I used to listen to. I bought some Christian music and I listened to that. And it was just a good feeling in my heart. And then when after the Easter that we had an orientation in church one time, and they said that we need to be baptized. And also, to anybody who would want to go to Bible study. And when I got to the pastor, I told him, I said, I never owned the Bible. I don't know nothing about the Bible. He said, well, go and see that man. So I went and saw the man, and so he told me the time he has Bible study. I went there. I was the only one there. He said, well, I'm waiting for more people. Well, nobody came, so I was there. So I told him short about my life, and he tried to explain something to me, and I still remember there was a cross in the Bible. There were the people on one side, Jesus in the middle, and God was on the other side. So I remember in order to get to God, you had to go through Jesus. I remember that. But nobody came. And then it was the second time I went, still nobody came. I went to 5 classes. I was the only one. But God knew my heart, and He knew me. He knew if I would be embarrassed, not knowing nothing, I would have walked out and never walked back. So I had one-on-one lesson. So the second time we were 5 people, and then the third time we were 15 people. I enjoyed going to that Bible study and listening to it. And I did get baptized. I didn't really know exactly the meaning of it, but I did it because I was supposed to. But anyway, to tell you, I had to get baptized 3 times in order to understand why I was baptized. I had to die with Jesus and be raised up with him. But it took me a long time, never had a Bible and that, and to learn everything. It's just hard with I never had any English classes. I only had 4-year grammar school in German. So I learned English through my kids, reading the little storybooks and everything. So it just kind of was hard for me to understand things. But I did, I progressed, and I'm still learning, and I enjoy it. I just going. Yes, I do. So anyway, I got baptized, and then one time some lady asked me to do some sewing for a man. I said, no, I don't sew for men. Oh, she said, please help me, do me a favor. I'm kind of busy, and it just needs his pants set. His name is James Barry. I said, no, I'm done with men. And I said, okay, send him over. I have his pants. So he came, I looked out of the window and I said, oh, he comes on a motorcycle. Skinny man with a beard and white hair. And I thought, oh God. So he came in, he brought his 2 pants, and I said, do you want to try him on so I know? Oh, no. And he said, just have him 2 inches. Okay. I did. I said, I have him ready in 2 weeks. So he came in a week. And picked up his pants, and we talked again. And he left. And then he called me back and he said, the 1 pants is still too long. I said, well, bring it back and I fix it. So he brought the pants back. And we started to talk. Jimmy was married, was divorced, had 5 kids. I was divorced, had 5 kids. So we were talking and talking. And he left, and when he left, he called me. He said, would you go out with me to dinner? And I said, no way. Thinking, I am done with man. There's no way. But he was going to the same church I was going. So anyway, then I thought to myself, well, there's nothing wrong to go with a friend to have dinner. So when he came to pick up his fans, he apologized. I said, no, it's okay. I thought it was okay to go. So we went to dinner. Then he invited me on a motorcycle ride, and I thought, woo, that's fun, So we went and rode around, and then every 2 weeks we went with the church group. We were about 50 people, motorcycles. We were going and riding around, and it was only 3 months, and Jimmy asked me to marry him. Oh, no. We had a lot of fun. We were talking. He made me laugh and everything. And I agreed, so we got married. And that was the one time I had all my kids there. And it was really, a marriage before God, by a minister. And for our honeymoon, he wanted to go to Daytona. So, okay, we went to Daytona and visited the church there. And we met the pastor there, Pastor Mitch Pritchard. And we stayed there for a week, and we went to Wednesday night Bible study. He was doing the Bible study, and I thought, wow, that was really nice what he was talking. Sorry. So anyway, where was I?
Wednesday night Bible study.
Where was I going with this?
Anyway, we got married, and I thought that was nice. That he talked nice about the Bible and very informative. And so on the way to the hotel, Jimmy said if he wouldn't have met me, he would have been living here because he helped to build that church. He would come weekends and help them. And I said, here, it's a small town that's country-like. West Palm Beach is a city, you know where everything is. And I thought, well, so anyway, we went home, and then his friend had a heart attack. We came back to Daytona, and when we went after the Sunday church, we drove again, and we had the windows open. It was September. The birds, I could hear the birds, and I said, wow, I wouldn't mind living here. And he said, what? He stopped the car, and he said, you really mean it? Yeah. So we went back home. I told my daughter Ann, we're going to sell the house, and we're going to move to Daytona, and we did. And we went to that church, and Pastor Mitch started then his own church. And when I went to the church there, I didn't understand that pastor much. And when I would ask questions, he was kind of like annoyed with me because maybe I didn't say it right or whatever. So I heard that Pastor Mitch started his own church. So I started looking for him, and I went to Pastor Mitch. And I stayed with Pastor Mitch until 2 years ago when I came here to Kendallville. I was going to church every Sunday, every Wednesday. I worked for Walmart. It never bothered me. I always worked in the evening. So I went Sunday to church and then to work. But I was sick 2 years ago in January. And I had polymyalgia. And it attacked all my muscles in my body. I couldn't move, I couldn't dress myself, nothing. And then at night I would see the apartment here in Kendallville, which Helga had shown me. And that went on for 3 nights. So I went to my pastor and I talked to him about it. I said, Pastor Mitch, I said, I have that vision all the time. I don't know why, but he said, yeah. And it's time to move. You need to go there. So I called Helga, made the reservation, and put down money for the apartment, and I moved here. But what God had done in my life, looking back, knowing He was there in concentration camp, He had a purpose, a plan for me. I had to go through all the marriages, all the heartaches, but I was 65 years when I got saved. I'm 84 today, and I'm going strong to be 85. And whatever the Lord is doing, I can never thank Him enough. I want to give Him all the praise. Everything I do for Him. I ask Him now, what can I do for you, Lord? You have done so much for me. About 13 years ago, we started doing shoeboxes in the church. They asked to put a shoebox together and put some stuff in there. So I started. I got excited. I brought stuff home. I put it on the floor in the living room and put stuff in. Then I had leftover. I went and bought more and then bought more boxes. And then I ended up with 19 boxes. They were asking to make a box for a boy or a girl. Well, I had 19 boxes. Because I thought if anybody would have walked in to a concentration camp with just a little bit of anything, a toothbrush or soap or a piece of toy, it would have meant so much for me, for all of us. And now I want to give it back to those children who never get anything. So we are making shoe boxes all the time. I buy stuff on sale at Walmart. Thank God I'm working there, and they let me know when things are on sale. And I grab it, and then I box it up, and I send it to Florida, to Daytona, to my church. We used to do it all the time together. And so I send the boxes there, and last year my pastor said, come on down, and I pay the fare for you. We need you to help you. So I went down there, and it's a small church, maybe 160 people, but we made 319 boxes. And I think this is what the Lord wants me to do, something to care for His children. I want to give God all the glory. Thank you, Lord, for giving me the opportunity to talk what you have done in my life and in many other lives. I'm so grateful for my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren. And I'm hoping to be here many more years to enjoy them. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for everything you listen to me.